listening to Late Night Radio on the SHR Media Network. Caution, there will be mature themes explored and potentially adult language used. If conservatarian words, phrases, certain concepts, or rhetoric offends you, tune out now.
Uh-oh, guess what day it is? Guess what day it is? Huh? Anybody? Julie, hey, guess what day it is? Oh, come on, I know you can hear me. Mike. What day is it, Mike?
Oh, you magnificent bastard, I read your book. I drink your milkshake.
How dare you?
I call that bold talk for a one-eyed fat man.
Fill your hand, you son of a bitch.
Captain.
Captain. Captain. Captain. Captain.
Captain.
Captain. Captain. Captain. Captain.
Captain.
Captain. Captain. Captain.
Captain.
Captain.
Captain.
Captain. Captain.
No, not yet. Don't pass out on me yet. Of course you realize this means war.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same. And if you and I don't do this, then you and I may well spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it once was like in America when men were free.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. And I'm all out of bubblegum.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to BZ's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show, where I am broadcasting behind enemy lines in occupied California, always spelled with a K. I'm here 2 miles east of the locus of evil on the entire left coast, the Bill Mill, the belly of the beast, the Capitol building in downtown Sacramento at 10th and L Streets, where late at night you can hear the death of common sense and its concomitant wail as it wafts from that putrefying edifice. And at the end of the show, when I exit the plush, resplendent, sumptuous, and palatial SHR Media studios, I'll be smelling the odoriferous stench of sulfur, brimstone, and evil emanating from that building in downtown Sacramento. So be forewarned, what you're about to hear for the next 2 hours, perhaps some overtime, not sure, consists of my opinion and no one else's because of the fear porn that has gripped this nation. The saloon is no longer open, but I'm still serving stiff drinks. Facts, history, logic, rationality, proportion, context, tradition, intent, and common sense out the back door. A reminder, we don't water our drinks just like we don't water our conversation. Politics, religion, crime, culture, economics, race, sex, science, law. We talk about it all right here at the saloon, where the speech is free but the booze is not. This is 2020. It's October the 22nd, Thursday. October the 22nd, the year of our Lord 2020. And as everyone knows, I am done with bipartisanship and compromise. Why can't we all get along? Yeah, that's how we got here. This is the new age of modern political warfare. Because make no mistake, we are at war. A few things occurred. I left up in Twitter. Let me see what's happening right now. We just got through with the debate. And I'm not going to go into the debate tonight except to say something similar to Biden showed his age. His drugs were coming down. It was a little late for him to stay up. And for 96 minutes, or however long it occurred, all Biden did when he opened his mouth was lie. Although not quite at the decibel level, each of them, the decibel level, of the prior debate. That's good, that's bad, not quite sure. Don't have time to waste, so what I'm suggesting is we just get right into it right now, okay?
The Bloviating Zeppelins HeyJackass.com Chicago Death Toll Update. Courtesy of Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot.
And this is from HeyJackass.com, illustrating Chicago values. October to date, shot and killed 40, shot and wounded 215 in the city of Chicago. Total shot 255, total homicides 46. The week in progress now. October the 18th to October the 22nd, shot and killed 3, shot and wounded 28, total shot 31, total homicides 5. Year to date, shot and killed 589, shot and wounded 2,874, total shot 3,463, total homicides 650. Yes, clearly illustrating Chicago values. And that's why I do that here at the Saloon. We're going to get into some stories. I have a great audio cut. And this just occurred today. And I haven't seen it anywhere else. I haven't heard it anywhere else. So you're going to hear it here first from an individual who should know something. This is the individual who was working with Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, who is a registered Democrat who has contributed to Democrats. And because of what's been happening or what hasn't been happening,
stand by for news.
With the various American media maggots, now he wants to come out and talk. So this is Tony Bobulinski. He held a presser today, and what he's saying is rather extraordinary. What he said in summary was that, and look, we all suspected, we all knew. What he said is he's claiming Joe Biden knew about Hunter's business deals. Well, I think your average 10-year-old would probably know something like that. But I haven't heard this anywhere else, and I wonder how long.
Good evening. My name is Tony Bobulinski.
This video is going to stay up.
I served as a lieutenant in the United States Navy with high security clearance. My father and grandfather both served for decades in our country's armed forces. Since leaving the Navy, I've been involved in various successful businesses, both in this country and abroad. I am making this statement to set the record straight about the involvement of the Biden family, Vice President Biden, his brother Jim Biden, and his son Hunter Biden in dealings with the Chinese. I have heard Joe Biden say that he's never discussed business with Hunter. That is false. I have firsthand knowledge about this because I directly dealt with the Biden family, including Joe Biden. I have also heard that Vice President Biden said on Tuesday that Senator Ron Johnson, the chair of the Senate Homeland Security Committee, should be ashamed for suggesting that Biden family sought to profit from their name. Well, here are the facts I know, and everything I'm saying is corroborated by emails, WhatsApp chats, agreements, documents, and other evidence. And the American people can judge for themselves. I brought, I guess, for record, 3 phones that spanned the years 2015 through 2018. These phones have never been held by anybody else besides myself. I was told this past Sunday by somebody who was also involved in this matter that if I went public this information, it would bury all of us, man. The Bidens included. I have no wish to bury anyone. I've never been political. The few contributions I have made have been to Democrats. But what I am is a patriot and a veteran. To protect my family name and my business reputation, I need to ensure that the true facts are out there. In late 2015, I was approached.
You understand? That's why he's doing it. For him and his family name.
By James Gilliar, whom I had known for many years, about joining him in a deal which he said would involve the Chinese state-owned enterprise CEFC China Energy and what he called one of the most prominent families in the United States. I was informed first by Gilliar and then by Hunter Biden and by Rob Walker, who was working with the Bidens, that the Bidens wanted to form a new entity with CFC, which was to invest in infrastructure, real estate, and technology in the U.S. and around the world. And the entity would initially be capitalized with $10 million and then grow to billions of dollars of investment capital. After months of discussion, I agreed at Gilliar and Hunter Biden's request to become CEO of the entity to be called Sinohawk. Sino representing the Chinese side, Hawk representing Hunter Biden's brother Bo's favorite animal. And between February and May 2017, we exchanged numerous emails, documents, and WhatsApp messages concerning Sinohawk and its potential business. On May 2nd, 2017, the night before Joe Biden was to appear at the Milken Conference, I was introduced to Joe Biden by Jim Biden and Hunter Biden. At my approximately hour-long meeting with Joe that night, we discussed the Biden's history, the Biden's family business plans with the Chinese, with which he was plainly familiar, at least at a high level. After that meeting, I had numerous communications with Hunter, Walker, Gilliar, and Jim Biden regarding the allocation of the equity ownership of Sinohawk. On May 13, 2017, I received an email concerning allocation of equity, which says 10% held by H for the big guy. In that email, there's no question that H stands for Hunter, big guy for his father, Joe Biden, and Jim for Jim Biden. In fact, Hunter often referred to his father as the big guy or my chairman. On numerous occasions, it was made clear to me that Joe Biden's involvement was not to be mentioned in writing, but only face-to-face. In fact, I was advised by Gilliar and Walker that Hunter and Jim Biden were paranoid about keeping Joe Biden's involvement secret. I also had a disagreement with Hunter about the funds CFC was contributing to Sinohawk. Hunter wanted $5 million of those funds to go to himself and his family, so he wanted the funds wired directly to an entity affiliated with him. I objected because that was contrary to our written agreements concerning Sinohawk. He said, referring to the chairman, his father, that CFC was really investing in the Biden family.
There you go.
That he held the Trump card and that he was the one putting his family legacy on the line. He also said to me on May 17, 2017, that CFC wanted to be my partner, to be partner with the Bidens. During these negotiations, I repeated to Hunter and others that Sinohawk could not be Hunter's personal piggy bank. And I demanded that proper corporate governance procedures be implemented for capital distributions. Hunter became very upset with me. CFC through July 2017 was assuring me the funds would be transferred to Sinohawk, but they were never sent to our company. Instead, I found out from Senator Johnson's September report that the $5 million was sent in August 2017 to entities affiliated with Hunter. Tomorrow, I will be meeting with the Senate committee members concerning this matter, and I will be providing to the FBI the devices which contain the evidence corroborating what I have said.
Thank you.
So I will not be taking any questions at this time. I will not be taking questions at this time.
Well, we're going to ask him anyway.
The evidence sits on these three phones. I don't want to go into anything any further. This will all be discussed with Senator Johnson and his committee, and the American people can decide what's fact.
Who paid for you to be here? Who paid for your expenses to be here?
Did you hear that? Who paid for you to be here? That's the kind of question that the American media maggots are asking this guy. I'm going to get into happy stories in a moment because there are quite a few, but there's a story I'll also wager you didn't hear about. This is again from the New York Post, who seems this week to have an odd schedule of breaking any number of stories. Were you aware that there were 12 Chinese communists in Seattle that were working on ways to censor you over Facebook? I've got that story in just a moment, but right now it looks like I've got somebody on the telephone. Go ahead, caller. How are you doing tonight?
How are you doing, BZ? This is Mike.
Hey, Mike. How you doing, sir?
You know, I like that soundbite you just played, but did you watch any of the debate?
I didn't get to watch much of it because it takes about 25, 30 minutes or so for me to drive here. So I saw a little bit of it. I didn't see the bulk of the middle, and I saw a little bit of it with Sackhead Sean when I got in the door and began to set up.
Well, what you missed is not. I mean, the answers were good by the president, but the president was back to his good orange self. But if you watch the debate from beginning to end, and you can go back and watch it probably on YouTube or whatever, watch Biden's coloring change. His face gets redder and redder and redder and redder, and that signals to me that he was getting angrier and angrier and angrier. The more Trump was, the more the president was scoring points on him. He got angrier and angrier and angrier because he knew he couldn't, he knew he couldn't come back on the president. And that's number one. Number two, that tells you something. That tells you that Biden has a quick temper.
Well, we knew that when he said that he's for all the unions, etc. Let's see. The two people that he got pissed off at and angry at were, that's right, 2 union members. Oh, that's a really great way to win people and influence people. The other thing I did hear is that his decibel level went up quite a bit during one point. The other thing that I found is that he just couldn't stop lying. Again, he said, no, I'm not stopping fracking. Trump said, well, that's what you've said before. Well, find the video. Well, Trump is going to put that video on whitehouse.gov tomorrow for sure. Then he said, I will stop fracking on federal property. Really? Yeah. So if you think you've opened the door to stopping fracking on federal property with I love this, Mike, I loved this new term, AOC plus 3. With AOC plus 3 behind Joe Biden, telling him what to do because they are pulling the strings of Pelosi, and now they will soon be they are pulling the strings of Biden right now. If they stop fracking on federal properties, you can be guaranteed that they're going to stop fracking on private properties as well. Take that one to the bank.
Oh, yeah, and think about it. You're talking about him putting it on whitehouse.gov. I guarantee you that you know that Kayleigh McEnany does her daily press briefings. I guarantee you she's going to play that clip at her press briefing.
It will be a sight to behold, because if there's one thing that Kayleigh McEnany is not, is stupid. You do realize, folks, don't you, that she has a huge tabbed binder that she takes with her to the podium every time she conducts a press conference. And the tabs are all with topics. And all of those topics include all the quotes over a vast period of time from all the leftists. And she throws their crap right back at them. Another reason that she is so terribly hated. Another reason that Trump is so terribly hated. Mike, got any other observations, sir?
Yeah, there's a reason. There's this guy that does a podcast on YouTube called Pete Santelli. There's a reason why he calls her Kaylee MAGA Hammer.
Oh, I like that. I've stolen AOC plus 3. Thanks, President Trump. And I like that too. Good.
All right. I'm listening, BZ.
Yes, sir. All right. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. If you're interested in calling in, I'll throw this out too. It's 575-208-4481. If you happen to be watching, darn me. Let's see. Okay, if you happen to be watching on YouTube or Facebook, and I don't really know how long you're going to be watching on YouTube or Facebook, the number 575-208-4481 is at the bottom of the screen if you're watching the streaming. 575-208-4481. And in the chat room, welcome to Mike, to Simone, the Alaskan, Jack, Kaiser, Mambo, and also over in Facebook chat, Alan, Leslie, Don, Jimmy. Thanks for being here, folks. And Alan was in there, and also Jeremy was in there as well. So thank you all for being on Facebook. I appreciate it. It's good to listen live now because my guess tomorrow would be this Facebook post, this streaming will be removed, and YouTube will possibly remove this show because of two things. I've mentioned that guy's video, and nobody else is pumping that bad boy out as far as I know. And the other point is when I go into my SHR Media Network special report, the rest of it is going to be about the coronavirus, absolutely everything that they completely hate. Here's the story that we didn't get to from the New York Post. There are 12 members of the Chinese Communist Party in Seattle figuring out here in the United States how to censor you and remove your speech. And no, I'm not kidding. From the New York Post, meet your Chinese Facebook censors. China is one of the most censorious societies on earth, so what better place for Facebook to recruit social media censors? There are at least half a dozen, quote, Chinese nationals who are working on censorship, a former Facebook insider told me last week, the author. So at some point, Facebook bosses, thought, hey, we're going to get them H-1B visas so they can do this kind of work continuously. The insider shared an internal directory of the team that does much of the work. It's called Hate Speech Engineering. George Orwell, please call your office. Your terms are coming back to you. And most of its members are based on Facebook's offices there in Seattle, as I indicated. A lot of them have PhDs, and their work is extremely complex, involving machine learning, teaching computers how to learn and act without being explicitly programmed, as the techie website deepai.org puts it. What are they there for? When it comes to censorship on social media, that means teaching the Facebook code so certain content ends up at the top of your newsfeed. A feat that earns the firm Software Wizards discretionary bonuses, per the X-Insider. It also makes sure that other content shows up dead last. So the question is, I wonder whose content would be dead last. You know that answer. Hey, here's somebody that I couldn't pass up. I've got 2 audio cuts that I just couldn't pass up. The second one will require probably you turning down your volume because it's going to make you, it'll blow your eardrums out, but I had to include it because, well, I'm just me anyway. Here's a white fragility cult member trying to explain her ideology to you. Now, if you can get through this psychobabble pablum speech and understand it completely, you're a better man than I, Gunga Din.
How white fragility, because white fragility is a byproduct of white supremacy, leads to social control. Like if you don't have the term, if you cannot with confidence apply the correct term to what is taking place, because people can't handle the use of that term, then that is an act of ideological subversion that prevents people from being able to apply a term, that prevents people from being authentically able to describe the experience that they're having. And what I would say is that the reason why white fragility, in a nutshell, reinforces social structures that are inequitable towards BIPOC is because it renders the avenues that we would take to speak up, to leverage, to organize, to have the control, to use what we do have by way of power to change things. It renders those avenues difficult to access because we're afraid of the reactions that we will get from white people.
You're a snowflake. You're afraid anyway. You're afraid of your own shadow. Okay, damn it. Okay, I forgot to do the right thing. And the right thing is I'm ready for this. Aren't you?
It's time for happy stories and good times.
I was ready for that. By the way, President Trump conducted an interview with Leslie Stahl. And a lot of people keep saying something similar to, President Trump, why do you continue to talk to these asshats? Well, now the interesting thing on that is he is afraid, with very good reasoning, that he's going to be taken completely out of context because that's what the American media maggots do. So he released all of the video already with Leslie Stahl. So anyone that has half a brain is going to compare what he released with what actually appears on 60 Minutes. Here's a bit of what he already said.
You think she'd ask questions like this of Joe? I don't think so.
Can you characterize your supporters?
Can you characterize your supporters?
People that love our country. And people that don't want to see the stores get looted and burned down.
Thank you.
People that don't want to see riots and they don't want to see anarchists. Yeah, I think I can. These are people that love our country. And they don't like to see.
But you don't see.
They don't like to see policemen get shot and not be able to defend themselves. They don't like to see rioting in the middle of Fifth Avenue or in the middle of other streets in Portland or other places. And they like it when their president gets the endorsement of virtually every police group and, frankly, almost everybody having to do with law and order. Positive law and order. But you know what they are? They're people that love our country more than anything else, and they like to see our country thrive.
That's how he characterizes his supporters. Now, this is the point where, this is part of Happy Stories, but this is the point where this is a compendium of gaups. So let's see, what do you call that? Let's see, there's a, there's a murder of crows. There's something like a slither of cobras. And what I'm going to play for you now, I think, I labeled a complaint of Karens. Don't say I didn't warn you about the level. you got to laugh at that crap. You absolutely have to laugh at that crap. And, of course, you guys heard about the 50 former Intel, whatever the hell they were, that, oh, wait, I'm not going to do a full break tonight. I'm just going to let you know this.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
So it's 8:31 in the West Coast. It's 11:31 on the East Coast, and in Bolivia, it's 14:29 and 17.2. 734, paragraph 4, Grote Cluster 2, in Bolivian time, because I never quite understood Bolivian time. But the interesting point is, as I was saying, remember the 50 Intel specialists? They're retired. They're not connected to intelligence anymore. But they wrote a letter saying that this stuff with Biden is nothing but Russian interference. Again, it's the thriving drumbeat of Russia, Russia, Russia. Yeah, Jack Alexander in chat says, it's not a democracy, you dumb and uneducated bitch. It's a republic. Russia, Russia, Russia. Here's what the 50 guys who put their names on that letter, here's what they're doing. Guaranteed. That letter is an audition to the Biden campaign to let them know, we got your back, Joe. So if you want to appoint us, any of the 50, to a great position, either on your cabinet or some other cool appointments, we're your guys. That's what they were talking about. In the meantime, the guy that really knows what's going on, our current DNI, Director of National Intelligence, John Ratcliffe, talked to Maria Bartiromo and said, because he would know, he's got his finger on the intelligence, he said basically
what's real and what's fake. Is this Russian disinformation, Director?
So, Maria, it's funny that some of the people that complain the most about intelligence being politicized are the ones politicizing intelligence. And unfortunately, in this case, it is Adam Schiff, the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, who, as you pointed out on Friday, said that the intelligence community believes that Hunter Biden's laptop and the emails on it are part of some Russian disinformation campaign. Let me be clear. The intelligence community doesn't believe that because there's no intelligence that supports that. And we have shared no intelligence with Chairman Schiff or any other member of Congress that Hunter Biden's laptop is part of some Russian disinformation campaign. It's simply not true. And this is exactly what I said I would stop when I became the Director of National Intelligence, and that's people using the intelligence community to leverage some political narrative. And in this case, apparently Chairman Schiff wants anything against his preferred political candidate to be deemed as not real and is using the intelligence community or attempting to use the intelligence community to say there's nothing to see here. Don't drag the intelligence community into this. Hunter Biden's laptop is not part of some Russian disinformation campaign, and I think it's clear that the American people know that.
Well,
who would know other than him? Those 50 guys? No. Here's the other thing that falls into the core of happy stories. This was glorious. All the dupes who are never Trumpers got together and decided that they were going to call themselves the Lincoln Project because they were so honest to their core. They represented Lincoln. All they are is an assload of never Trumpers. Here's a story from the Federalist. They were duped. FBI. Lincoln Project never Trumpers peddled Iranian disinformation and shoved it on down the line, meant to help Biden. Isn't that amazing? Didn't see that coming. Director of National Intelligence John Ratcliffe, who we just heard, and FBI Director Christopher Wray announced Wednesday that Iran and Russia are working to undermine the integrity of the 2020 election. We'd like to alert the public that we have identified that two foreign actors, Iran and Russia, because you all know that they work in concert, have taken specific actions to influence public opinion relating to our elections, Ratcliffe said during an evening press conference. So according to Ratcliffe, Iran and Russia got their hands on U.S. voter registration information, enabling the foreign adversaries to send false information to registered voters as a means to sow chaos and confusion and undermine the public's confidence in America's electoral process. To that end, we've already seen Iran send spoofed emails designed to intimidate voters, incite social unrest, and damage President Trump. The foreign nations aren't the only disseminators of false information. American groups, including Never Trump operations, called the Lincoln Project, they happen to serve as Iran's American digital foot soldiers, buying into the disinformation, and then they amplified it. This is a tweet. The FBI now confirms Iran sent fake emails posing as Proud Boys to help Joe Biden. So Project Lincoln and other left-wing accounts all spread Iranian disinformation meant to assist Biden. Lincoln Project, you useful dupes, you tools. Here's another happy story, because shit will out, as we generally know. Remember that guy named Joe on a Joe Biden ad who was portrayed as a struggling bar owner? Well, dailycaller.com apparently revealed that he's a wealthy owner, a Michigan bar owner, featured in that Joe Biden commercial campaign ad. Said his business may fail because of President Trump's COVID-19 response. Who is he really? He's a wealthy tech investor who made it big after receiving a large family inheritance. Joe Malkoun, the co-owner of The Blind Pig, said in the end his bar was nothing more than an empty room because of Trump's inaction. He doesn't need any money. He's wealthy already. And while we're on the topic, anybody that voted for Mitt Romney, aren't you sad because of that? Mitt Romney came out and said, the Associated Press came out with this article. Romney said, Biden probe, not a legitimate role of government. So let me see if I get this right. Mitt Romney, who after the election, and he was running for president, Mitt Romney came and said to one of his sons, after all, I don't really think that I was very interested in running for president. Then why did we vote for you, asshole? So this faux Republican now confirms in his mind that government corruption, graft, and treason should never be investigated. The happy story is, yeah, he's that stupid. And Utah, I have to ask you, how is it possible to, folks, you're going to have to turn all the little children away because I'm off today. There will be words used. How do you keep electing this human dildo named Mitt Romney? I really don't know. But there he is, reputedly an Republican, or so he says. Well, I have a couple of other happy stories. Let me just glaze through a couple of them. I already reminded you that Trump made his own recording. And if you go look for it, you can find that, let's see, what is this? Project Veritas has a new ad out and a new video where Google ad execs boast that the company, as you already know, but they're simply putting words to it, they can censor right-wingers and Republicans any damn time they want. Speaking of which, the Senate Judiciary Committee recently voted to subpoena Twitter and Facebook CEOs. As far as I'm concerned, that's a happy story. Here's another one that you didn't hear, guaranteed. Weekly unemployment claims drop as labor market recovery continues. Oh, and here's one more happy story that I need to tell you about.
Supreme Court justice, as I think you've already written, We'll be voting to confirm Justice to be Barrett next Monday, and I think that will be another signature accomplishment in our effort to put on the courts, the federal courts, men and women who believe in the quaint notion that maybe the job of the judge is to actually follow the law.
These days, that is a quaint little notion. And now I'm going to transition, I hope most nicely, into this. I suspect there may be some overtime involved, but I'm attempting to point out to you for essentially the next 2 hours that what you've been told about the current state of Wuhan 19 by leftists, Democrats, is all a lie.
This is an SHR Media Network special report.
And basically it's about the coronavirus. Where's the science? I have the science for you tonight. Now, I've made any number of special reports previously, but this one, even between then and now, there's a ton of new information that's out for anyone to find and see. I have the internet like all the reporters. No one wants to look at the internet anymore. No one wants to look at the New York Post. No one has an inquisitive mind anymore. There are no more journalists. There's simply a propaganda machine for the DNC, the Democrats, and the leftists. So I have a ton of previous posts on this and previous shows. And I've had, since then, videos that I originally inserted in those shows and posts, obviously removed from and by the American media maggots and social media who refuse to tell you the truth. Or they tell you a half-truth. Or they insist that the average citizen has no means whatsoever of discovering the truth. Occasionally, only very occasionally does something seep out and take the American media maggots to task. Here's one amusing instance that I have on audio for you guys, involving Brian Stelter from CNN. This is a caller from Minnesota.
I always talk about how many times Trump has lied. I've calculated that I think with your chyrons, I don't know if there's any journalists left at CNN, but I know that, if I were to estimate about 300 different, distortions or misinformation that we get out of CNN, and you have to watch them in the airport, which is harsh, but if you added all that up to 46 months, it comes out to be 300,000 plus distortions of truth. So my thing is that you guys, this is how low you'll go, is that you went out and you made lies and you defamed a child. And then you had to settle out of court to pay this child for distorting information about this young individual.
I'm running out of time, so I'm going to have to move on, but I think you get the gist of that. The basic truth up front is this, and I'm going to emphasize this time and time again tonight. The Wuhan 19 survival rate, 0 to 9, this is from the CDC. I'm not pulling this out of my ass. The COVID survival rate, 0 to 19 years, 99.997%, says the CDC. 20 to 49 years, 99.98%. That includes the bulk of teachers who refuse to go back to school. People who are 50 to 69 years, 99.5%. People 70 plus with likely comorbidities, if for no other reason than that age, 94.6%. And people are not emphasizing this to you. They simply want to ride on the coattails of fear porn. Information is here already, folks, that lockdowns don't work. Yet a number of Democrat-run states, mayors, and many nations in Europe now, we'll get to that, believe in doubling down on the very thing that time has proven to be a rather spectacular failure. More lockdowns. They want more lockdowns and more lockdowns. Rights repressed. Your rights. Businesses killed, families ruined, the health of thousands and thousands of people just here in the United States ruined, lives shattered by ever-increasing suicides. I was having a discussion with another individual who I won't name right now because I don't know really if they want to be named, who was affected in a family way and a friend who recently committed suicide. And we had a discussion of possibly why. This is from the New York Post. It's now looking like the lockdowns may have been a huge mistake. Were lockdowns a mistake? To that nagging question, the answer increasingly seems to be yes. Certainly, they were a novelty. As novelist Lionel Shriver says, we've never before responded to a contagion by closing down whole countries. As I've noted, the 1957 to 1958 Asian flu killed between 70,000 and 116,000 Americans, between 0.04% and 0.07% of the nation's population. The 1968 Hong Kong flu killed about 100,000 people, 0.05% of the population. And the sensible adage that you quarantine those affected and shield those at highest risk has apparently fallen by the wayside. The U.S. coronavirus death toll of slightly over 200,000 is a 0.065% of the current population. It will go higher, but it's about the same magnitude as those two flus. And it has been less deadly to those under 65 than the flus were. Yet there were no state lockdowns, no massive school closings, no closings of office buildings and factories, restaurants and museums. Nobody considered shutting down Woodstock, which occurred at that time. And here's a key. Plus, we are now much more risk-averse as a nation than we ever were. Children aren't allowed to walk to school. Jungle gyms have vanished from playgrounds. College students are shielded from microaggressions. We have a safetyism mindset, as Jonathan Haidt and Greg Lukianoff write in The Coddling of the American Mind, under which many aspects of students' lives needed to be carefully regulated by adults. Helicopter parents, anybody? The legitimate fears that hospitals would be overwhelmed apparently explained the, in retrospect, deadly orders of the governors of New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Michigan requiring elderly care facilities to admit COVID-infected patients. And the original purpose to flatten the curve segued into stamp out the virus. By the way, you guys do know that New York Governor Cuomo is telling you and lying to your face, saying, no, I did not insist and I did not send hot Wuhan 19 patients into elderly facilities and nursing care homes. Bullshit. You did. Here comes the truth that nobody in government wants to admit. The cure is worse than the disease. Lockdowns prevented cancer screenings, heart attack treatment, substance abuse counseling, the absence of which resulted in a large but hard to estimate number of deaths. They call that vindictive protectiveness, only it turned out not to be very protective. Most everybody that I've corresponded with recently on social media, and I'll ask you guys right now, put it in chat. Everybody knows someone, or directly, or a family member, or a friend who committed suicide in 2020. Or you know a friend or somebody in the family who's now taking medication because of the adverse effect of being locked down. The anti-lockdown blogger and former New York Times reporter Alex Berenson, If you haven't read his stuff, boy, you need to. This is what a bunch of this stuff is predicated on. But I go to the internet like a logical thinking human being, and I can find stuff on the internet which journalists apparently cannot. Air quotes, journalists. Alex Berenson makes a powerful case that lockdowns delayed rather than prevented infections. There are old lessons here. Governments can sometimes channel but never entirely control nature. What a revelation. There's no way to entirely eliminate risk. Attempts to reduce one risk increase others. Amid uncertainty, people make mistakes, life and maybe the lockdowns. Another doctor provided a warning. Stanford expert blasts COVID lockdown failures. We quarantined the healthy and we exposed the sick, which is exactly what we did. Then there was another article on lockdowns that never got revealed. There was a revolver study. This thing was huge. I don't have not nearly the time to go into it here. But Revolver did an exclusive study, COVID-19 lockdowns over 10 times more deadly than the pandemic itself. That was August 31st. A groundbreaking new study commissioned by Revolver News concludes COVID-19 lockdowns are 10 times more deadly than the actual COVID-19 virus in terms of years of life lost by American citizens. The economic devastation of the lockdowns will last for decades after the virus is brought under control. And it may lead to far worse ripple effects down the road. For the first time in its history, America has experienced what could be almost likened to a sudden stop in an emerging nation, a situation so crippling and perilous that long-term financial and social stability has been actually, verifiably, legitimately threatened, because in truth, there's no way to completely halt a pandemic. History should have taught us that by now. But leftist Democrats and the concomitant systemic bedwetters, the American media maggots, all have what I call historical Alzheimer's. They learn nothing from history, and that is purposeful. Because we've all seen situations like this. You've seen them in your own communities, in your own state, I am certain. Tennessee woman who passed away 6 months ago gets a letter saying she is COVID-19 positive. Good to know our government people are on top of all that stuff. And as we know, much of what I call the LDAM, which is the leftists, Democrats, and the American media maggots, they insist that despite junk like this, we need to lock down. They're not taking into account false tests, false positives, and tests. Were you aware of this, folks? There were tests that gave Wuhan 19 to people. An article. CDC's failed coronavirus tests were tainted with coronavirus. Feds confirm. As the new coronavirus took root across America, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention sent states tainted lab test kits in early February that themselves were seeded with the virus. And yet these are the people that you're told to listen to. Pediatrician Dr. Bob Hamilton also said about Wuhan 19 and children. Let them go. Let them go. Let them go back to school. Wuhan 19 also provides a golden opportunity for all those Democrats and leftists who are doing their level best to ensure President Trump is not reelected. Why? As I have said numerous times, listen to this, take this to the bank. In an election year, everything is about the election. California Governor Gavin Newsom currently has 30 lawsuits pending against him due to his arbitrary, what I call an arbitrary, capricious, and unconstitutional lockdown. He has 30 suits against him right now. If you listened last Tuesday night, I had Eric Regard in here. One thing he pointed out was that constitutionally, per California's constitution, you can, as the governor, indicate that there are 90 days to make adjustments. After those 90 days, any decisions go to the legislature. And, well, Gavin Newsom hasn't done that. As a matter of fact, this is a quote from Gavin Newsom. I don't agree with the new CDC guidance, period, full stop. It's not the policy in the state of California. Who makes that policy? He does. We're influenced by those who are experts in the field who feel very differently. We'll find out more about this. Also, as Eric Regard said last Tuesday, Newsom is choosing business winners and losers in this state, and so are leftist governors and mayors all throughout the fruited plain, favoring, of course, government. San Francisco keeps private gyms closed, but they have reopened city-owned gyms. So furious people who have private gyms call out the city leaders. San Francisco gyms have been forced by the liberal city to remain closed for months as part of measures implemented to reduce the spread of coronavirus. But city leaders have applied different rules for fitness facilities used by city employees. According to KNTV, city-owned indoor gyms have been open for months, all while privately owned indoor gyms have struggled to stay afloat. The result, KNTV reported, is crushing private gym owners. Imagine that. Imagine that. And then the other thing they don't want to hear is Fauci, Dr. Anthony Fauci, kind of made a mistake one day. And in this conversation with Steve Scalise, he kind of let a little bit of the cat out of the bag.
Let me ask you about some of the decisions that you worked with President Trump on, and the whole team did. I know when you go back to the beginning of this, the China ban was...
Now remember, Joe Biden said Trump screwed things up by the numbers, and no one would have done it that way.
Very heavily discussed. Were you involved in working with President Trump on deciding to ban flights from China?
Yes, sir, I was.
Do you agree with that decision?
I do.
Do you think that decision saved lives, Dr. Fauci?
Yes, I do.
Do you agree with the decision when ultimately we saw spread in Europe, and then the president recommended that we extend that to Europe? Did you participate in that discussion?
I was actively involved in that discussion, sir.
Do you agree with that decision?
Yes, I do.
Do you think that decision saved lives?
Yes, I do.
Eventually, then, we saw the United Kingdom have an outbreak, and there had to be a tough decision made. Do we extend that to the United Kingdom? Were you part of that decision?
I was.
And do you agree with that decision as well?
I do.
Did that decision save lives?
Yes, it did.
When you look at the 15 days to slow the spread, initially it started at 15. Were you part of the decision to implement that decision?
I was very much involved in that.
Did that decision save lives, Dr. Fauci?
I believe it did.
Then when President Trump met with you and Dr. Birx to extend that another 30 days, do you agree with that decision that President Trump made to extend that?
Yes, I was very much involved, and I agree with it.
Did that decision save lives, Dr. Fauci?
I believe it did.
So I know we've heard a lot about disagreements. Clearly, there are many decisions made. In fact, there are many very internationally respected doctors that are involved in each of those decisions. Is that correct?
Yes.
By and large, would you say that you and President Trump have been in agreement on most of those decisions?
We were in agreement on virtually all of those.
But you never heard that because the American media maggots didn't want you to hear that. So I repeat, the study at UCLA and Stanford that I mentioned in one of the earlier shows by researchers found the coronavirus is 10 times less fatal than thought, which translates to a healthy 50 to 60-year-old dying after a contact is 1 in 19.1 million. Now, I just want to remind people we're not going to have any breaks tonight. Just want to remind you where you are right now.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
I should remind everybody continuously, I've said this quite a number of times. You innately know this, don't you? Cases, because this is brought to you as cases. The cases are overwhelming. Cases mean nothing. The meaningful statistics are hospitalizations and deaths. But we also know, per the CDC itself, only 9,000 deaths were directly attributed to Wuhan 19 instead of 180,000 at the time. What they don't emphasize is there is a world of difference between dying of coronavirus and dying with coronavirus. No one wants to talk to you about that either. Is there a smear campaign to discredit a treatment, hydroxychloroquine? Dr. Mark McDonald is going to explain to you in just a moment about the true nature of hydroxychloroquine.
Hydroxychloroquine has been a safe and effective medication throughout the world for 65 years. It was developed from tree bark and then turned into quinine, which was used by the British in India to protect against malaria infections. Today, the synthetic form, which is hydroxychloroquine, is used throughout the world. It is actually a WHO-mandated necessary medication to prevent against malaria pandemics. And it's been used in the United States for lupus and rheumatoid arthritis on a daily basis for decades in patients who take it every single day. Women, children, pregnant women, nursing mothers, and elderly adults. Even now in Africa, it's considered to be a supplement and sold over the counter in many countries safely and effectively. Until this year, hydroxychloroquine was considered to be safe for all people. It was only after January of 2020 that hydroxychloroquine became the devil.
What do you think? Who's pushing against hydroxychloroquine? Who's behind it?
Well, I think there's a coalition of forces that are behind the push against hydroxychloroquine. It started in January when Gilead Pharmaceuticals announced some benefit to a patented drug called remdesivir that reduced hospital stay course for those with coronavirus by 3 or 4 days. Certainly meaningful, but certainly not curative. As soon as that happened, media, politicians, other special interest groups got on board with trying to stop hydroxychloroquine from being made available by doctors to their patients. And a whole campaign was set against it, including several research publications like The Lancet back in June that published fraudulent data that was later retracted.
Fraudulent data that was later retracted.
To say that hydroxychloroquine either didn't work or it killed people. My belief at this point is that it's all about the election. And
Stop. What did I tell you? If President Trump had come out and said something similar to hydroxychloroquine is the devil, it's the devil's juice, and I don't want anybody to have anything to do with hydroxychloroquine, it would be running off the shelves right this very moment.
There are people now in positions of power, politicians primarily, who will benefit from keeping America scared and stuck at home through November. And if all Americans had access to hydroxychloroquine, the pandemic would essentially end in about 30 days. And if that happens, a lot of people will lose.
The reason that they won't do that is because hydroxychloroquine is cheap, is effective. It's not remdesivir. It doesn't cost $9,000 a dose. In an election year, everything is about the election. You remember, for example, L.A. County Health Director Dr. Barbara Ferrer said the schools are not going to open until the election. So essentially, I speak leftist. So I'll translate for you. Screw the kids. It's political. The kids can go to hell. We're going to keep being locked down. Also remember that Dr. Fauci said it was safe to vote in November. Now he tells us that we got to hunker down until 2021. U.S. News wrote this on September 14th, and it was roundly ignored. U.S. COVID-19 cases fall 15% in past week. Deaths down for 4 weeks. The number of new cases of the novel coronavirus reported in the United States fell 15% last week from the previous 7 days. Deaths fell for a fourth week in a row, according to a Reuters analysis. The United States reported on average about 35,000 new cases each day in the week, ended September 13th, marking the 8th straight week of declines from a peak in July of about 70,000 new cases a day on average. More than 735 people a day died from COVID-19 last week, with fatalities declining in California and Texas and holding steady in Florida. So the dealio is, the American media maggots obviously won't let you hear good news if it can be used for any positive means or manner for OMB, Orange Man Bad, President Donald John Trump, the guy with the dead orange cat on his head. Because anything positive would likely assist President Trump in his re-election. So what we know, what history is telling us, is that in a continuing fashion, researchers can't seem to get their shit or stats or tests straight. This is from September 9th. Coronavirus testing at a Boston lab suspended after nearly 400 false positives. Hey, thinking people like you and me are probably asking, why are they always false positives? A Boston lab suspended coronavirus testing after an investigation uncovered nearly 400 false positive COVID-19 results. Origin, a biotechnology company which counts dozens of nursing homes as its clients, ceased testing on August 8th at the request of the Massachusetts Department of Public Health. The suspension came days after state health officials became aware of an unusually high number of positive coronavirus tests. An investigation found there were at least 383 inaccurate positive results from that lab upon retesting, came back as negative. Imagine that. Then we discovered a story that wasn't covered by literally any news organization right now other than, I don't know, I think the only people that addressed it was Fox News. And I think it was only Tucker Carlson on Tucker Carlson Tonight that had anything to do with that. So only on Fox did you hear anything that happened to be related to Dr. Li Mengyan indicated the coronavirus was released on purpose by China, created in a Chinese lab. And did you also note AG William Barr, who said the coronavirus lockdowns were the greatest intrusion on civil liberties since slavery? Attorney General William Barr said Wednesday evening, other than slavery, which was a different kind of restraint, coronavirus lockdowns were the greatest intrusion on civil liberties in American history. Barr's comments came during a Constitution Day celebration at, wait for it, Hillsdale College, where truth can be told, commemorating the date in 1789 when the Constitution was signed by the framers in Philadelphia. Throughout the coronavirus pandemic, Barr has expressed alarm at the restrictions imposed by state authorities and First Amendment rights, particularly the freedom of religion. Then we discovered, courtesy of the gentleman's not here right now. He was here, but he took off in SHR chat. Jack Alexander brought Australia to the forefront and made me aware of how repressive Australia has been, the state of Victoria in particular. They have some of the most oppressive and restrictive laws in a Western society. Then, do you remember the CDC was giving us false information? But you had to ask yourself, or was it? The CDC says aerosol guidance was posted in error to the website. So this became a major kerfuffle, and the reason I'm mentioning it, you will understand in just a moment. The CDC said on September 21st. Aerosol guidance was posted in error to the website, the CDC website. What they meant was this. On Friday, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention updated their guidelines to say the coronavirus can be spread through tiny respiratory droplets called aerosols that can linger in the indoor air. But according to reports from the Washington Post and CNBC, the CDC now says that information was posted on the website in error. A draft version of proposed changes to these recommendations was posted in error to the agency's official website, the CDC said, adding the organization is currently updating its recommendations regarding airborne transmission of COVID-19. Once this process has been completed, the update language will be posted. The short-lived revision made Friday suggested 6 feet might not always be enough distance. Okay? Hold that thought for a bit. We'll come back. I will come back to that. But whereas other states are locking down further or they're changing goalposts entirely, like California, always spelled with a K, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis says basically that he's done. So here he is speaking with Dr. Jay Bhattacharya from Stanford Medical School about the implications of PCR tests identifying non-infectious dead virus. Are we quarantining hundreds of thousands of Americans who are not contagious?
There's a lot of discussion always about just general testing and PCR testing, whether you should test asymptomatic people, just symptomatic, how many contacts. Dr. Bhattacharya, what is the this asymptomatic testing with PCR? But particularly, I think one of the things that's been put out, the New York Times had an article about a month ago looking at some of the test results in New York and in, I believe, Nevada and Massachusetts, and they found that because the PCR tests are so sensitive, that up to 90% of the positives were not identifying live infectious virus. And then I think there's other studies that have come out. I know Oxford's Center for Evidence-Based Medicine says that if you have such high sensitivity, you cannot be there's no guarantee you're even identifying live virus. And I think that, I guess, one, just what does that mean for some of the testing and the case numbers that we see? But then two, it seems to me that if you're test positive with no symptoms with a very sensitive PCR test, and they can't even tell you if you're infectious, we're quarantining across the country probably hundreds of thousands or millions of people who aren't even contagious. And I think that obviously has a huge cost to society. Doesn't seem to be getting a lot of discussion, though.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very important point. And actually, Dr. Levitt's a biologist, so he can tell us all about the PCR technology. But the key thing about the PCR technology that I think is important for this discussion is that essentially you were doubling the genetic material if it's present, of the virus if it's present, right? If you have a very tiny amount of the virus, or if it's a viral fragment that's not actually that your body has successfully attacked, your immune system is successfully attacked, then what you're amplifying is something that's not going to pose any risk either to you or to others. So you're asymptomatic. The PCR, you're positive with the PCR. It's not a false positive in a technical sense, but in a functional sense, it's a false positive. Epidemiologically, it's a false positive, right? I'm not going to infect you, even though I have this even though I'm PCR positive, because it took so many doublings to reach the point that we can infer that there really wasn't very much genetic material for the virus present to begin with. I think that you're absolutely right to point out the cost of that when you attach it to a policy of contact tracing and isolation and quarantine. We effectively are quarantining people on the basis of PCR tests, a functional false positive PCR tests, where it will have a
false positive
effect on disease spread because they're not
no effect on disease spread.
Infectious. And at the same time will impose enormous costs on them. Actually, there's another follow-on cost to that, is that it makes people less willing to cooperate with contact tracers because they know the costs. If I am contact traced and I'm asked to say who I've interacted with, I know if I say I interact with my friends, they're going to be facing the same thing. They might get quarantined, and if it's possible that it's a false positive, a functional false positive, then I'm imposing costs on them for nothing. I think in LA County, I saw an LA Times story that 60% of people who are contacted, who put in touch with contact tracers, they won't cooperate with them. And you can see why. The cost of essentially ratting your friends out is enormous.
And that's exactly what the government wants you to do. I've turned contact tracing off on my phone, and I hope you have too. This is a very interesting story. I glossed over it with Eric Regard on Tuesday. Elon Musk says he will not take a coronavirus vaccine, and he calls Bill Gates a knucklehead, which I find roundly amusing. But this story is ever so amusing. Elon Musk, a billionaire. SpaceX founder Elon Musk stirred the pot yet again after claiming that neither he or his family is going to take a COVID-19 vaccine, even if it was readily available. The 49-year-old billionaire dropped the bombshell during an appearance on the New York Times opinion podcast, Sway. He said, "I'm not at risk, neither are my kids." He told this to host Kara Swisher about the rationale behind his decision. During the bizarre exchange, the Tesla CEO decried the nationwide lockdown as a no-win situation, which has diminished my faith in humanity. Musk previously called widespread quarantines unethical and de facto house arrests. And he happens to be right. So instead of the current sweeping measures, the Boring Company boss suggested a more targeted lockdown where anybody who is at risk be quarantined until the storm passes. What does that mean? 94.6% 70 plus and above with comorbidities. Not essentially anybody else. And there we go. Fear porn has demanded that Americans put their lives on hold. And you got a quiver in the fetal position underneath your desk at home. Mattress manufacturers have benefited greatly due to the prodigious amounts of bedwetting all across the nation. Musk also said this: Gates said something about me not knowing what I was doing. Musk told Swisher, "It's like, hey, knucklehead, we actually make the vaccine machines for CureVac, the company you're invested in." Sort of a gentle reminder from Elon. He was referring to the fact that Tesla manufactures equipment for the German biopharmaceutical firm CureVac. Imagine that. And here's something you never heard. Bob Iger, CEO of Disney, left Governor Newsom's economic task force because he's going to have to fire, and is the process of doing so right now, 28,000 Disney employees in Southern California because they won't be opening. The story goes, Bob Iger quits Governor Newsom's Economic Recovery Task Force. According to a Disney spokesman from the Sacramento Bee, Disney Executive Chairman Bob Iger quit the California Governor Gavin Newsom's task force to reopen the economy. According to the report, the spokesperson would not say where or why Iger quit the task force. Now, you're a logical thinking human being. I bet you are. That's why you're here listening to the show, live or in podcast. Translated, Governor Newsom doesn't know what the hell he's doing. And as Iger suspected, on October 7th, Gavin Newsom did in fact say theme parks won't be opening any time soon. Well, BZ, why would that be? Because You got to remember, with leftists and Democrats, it's all about two things only. Life is only about two things: sex and race, race and sex. So now Gavin Newsom in California is changing the goalposts once again. Now, how possibly could he insert race or sex into this? Well, he's doing it by a required disease parity. He wants disease parity. Wait a minute. If I had a producer, what you would have heard is he wants disease parity. But that's not what you heard, because obviously I don't have a damn producer. Gavin Newsom moves goalposts on reopening again, now adding equity measures. Equity measures. This was in October, by the way. On the 197th day of 15 days to slow the spread, California Governor Gavin Newsom has moved the reopening goalposts once more. Originally, counties had to meet metrics aimed at ensuring adequate rates of testing and the availability of hospital ICU beds and ventilators. Contact tracing, by the way, was supposed to be a part of that, but that effort's been basically one big fat joke. I happen to know about that directly. Once hospitalization rates, ventilator usage, and death rates plummeted over the summer, Newsom changed his strategy and, well, he enacted by gubernatorial fiat a tiered system that completely ignored those metrics and instead focused on daily new cases and positivity rate. Now that more counties are set to move out of the most restrictive tier, Newsom's changed the game again and he's added an equity requirement that counties have to meet before they can move down a tier. And of course, it has to do with race. Because what else is there in life, like I said, of a leftist or a Democrat? That's right. Sex and race, race and sex. So, equity metric. You have to ensure that test positivity rates in its most disadvantaged neighborhoods, as defined by being in the lowest quintile of the Healthy Places Index census tracts, do not significantly lag behind its overall county test positivity rate as described in detail below. Targeted investments. This is what you have to do. Submit a plan that, 1, defines its disproportionately impacted populations, 2, specifies the percent of the COVID-19 cases in those populations, and 3, shows that it plans to invest epidemiology and laboratory capacity for prevention and control of emerging infectious diseases. Strategy 5, use laboratory data to enhance investigation, response, and prevention. Grant funds at least at that percentage to interrupt disease transmission in these populations. I'm not making this gibberish up. I'm reading it. This is what they've written. The targeted investments can include spending on augmenting testing, disease investigation, contact tracing, which doesn't work, isolation quarantine support, and education and outreach efforts for workers. Effective for the October 13th tier assignment, this plan must be submitted before a county may progress to a less restrictive tier. Due to data limitations in small populations, the equity metric described above cannot be reliably applied to smaller counties. As I've said before many times, you know me. Come on, man. You know me. I speak leftist. So I'll translate. California is now applying critical race theory to a pandemic. I remind you of this from the CDC. COVID survival rate. 0 to 19 years, 99.997%. 20 to 49 years, 99.98%. 50 to 69 years, 99.5%. 70 plus years old plus comorbidities, 94.6%. I'd also continue to remind everybody of that from the CDC and also what's happening in Europe right now. Do you remember, folks, Europe was the shining example of what to do according to leftists. So we're tracking the coronavirus. This is from the New York Times. United States on October 15th. New cases, 65,000. 14-day change, plus 25%. On October 15th, in the United States, new deaths, 783, down 2%. But you didn't hear about that, did you? Of course you didn't. That's purposeful. In early October, President Trump acquired Wuhan 19 himself. So the social media basically fell apart with wishes that President Trump would die. It really is no more complicated than that. So instead, what happened, however, is unlike the average 74-year-old, he recovered rapidly, precisely what the leftist Democrats and American media maggots didn't want. And this press conference, they didn't want to hear this.
And the president this morning is not on oxygen, not having difficulty breathing.
Damn it.
Walking around the White House medical unit upstairs. He's in exceptionally good spirits. And in fact, as we were completing our multidisciplinary rounds this morning, the quote he left us with was, "I feel like I could walk out of here today." And that was a very encouraging comment from the president.
Oh, crap. Did you hear, by the way, any of the press conferences besides that one with Dr. Connolly? The press said something like this. I'm making this shit up, but you and I both know this is what they were thinking. The questions went something like this. Is he dead? Why isn't he dead? Can you make him dead? He'll die soon, won't he? He's going to come back to the White House and kill people, isn't he? He's going to transmit Wuhan 19. And then the final question, you had him right there. Why didn't you kill him? Guaranteed that's what they were thinking. Dr. Harvey Risch in Newsweek wrote, "The key to defeating COVID-19 already exists. We need to start using it." As a professor of epidemiology at the Yale School of Public Health, I have authored over 300 peer-reviewed publications and currently hold senior positions on the editorial boards of several leading journals. I'm usually accustomed to advocating for positions within the mainstream of medicine, so I have been flummoxed to find that in the middle of a crisis, I'm fighting for a treatment that the data fully support, but which, for reasons having nothing to do with a correct understanding of the science, have been pushed to the sidelines. As a result, tens of thousands of patients with COVID-19 are dying unnecessarily. Fortunately, the situation can be reversed readily and quickly. I'm referring, of course, to the medication hydroxychloroquine. When this inexpensive oral medication is given very early in the course of illness, before the virus has had time to multiply beyond control, it has shown to be highly effective, especially when given in combination with the antibiotics azithromycin, otherwise known as a Z-Pak, or doxycycline, and the nutritional supplement zinc. The desperately wicked, inexcusable has been revealed again. I repeat, at the risk of becoming repetitive, in an election year, everything is about the election. Here's something. These are what people were saying, by the way.
To New Yorkers for coronavirus is low. And our city preparedness.
Remember. Oh, by the way, I have to tell you guys that this is the final half hour.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Now, remember, everyone was saying something similar to, Trump didn't take this seriously at the very beginning. You know me, man. I have access to the internet. So I can find you audio cuts like this that support that's a bunch of crap.
To New Yorkers for coronavirus is low, and our city preparedness is high.
This should not stop you from going about your life, should not stop you from going to Chinatown and going out to eat. I'm going to do that today myself.
There you go.
Come to Chinatown. Here we are. We're, again, careful, safe, and come join us.
There is no concern at this time for coronavirus in our region.
The Department of Sanitation is ready for Mardi Gras 2020.
The facts are reassuring.
We want New Yorkers to go about their daily lives.
But there's really no need to panic and to avoid activities that we always do as New Yorkers. We are a hardy people.
Americans do not need to panic. What I would suggest, however, is that Americans take this as a wake-up call for seasonal flu.
There's very little threat here. This disease, even if you were to get it, basically acts like a common cold or flu.
So we're telling New Yorkers, go about your lives, take the subway, go out, enjoy life, and certainly not to miss the parade next Sunday.
Yeah, that's important.
If you had to, would you close down the borders?
No.
We need to be honest about the American people, with the American people, about the fact that we can't keep people coming here from China.
And transmission is not that easy. I think there's been a misperception that coronavirus hangs in the air waiting to catch you. No, it takes direct person-to-person contact.
We also know that if it were likely to be transmitted casually, we would be seeing a lot more cases.
Right, because this is New York, and you're in elevators and trains.
Right. This is New York, and you'd be in a much highly, a lot of more transmitted cases. Then there was this. In contravention of the we made a mistake thing. Remember I said, I'll come back to this, and I have. And there's a reason it's in here, and there's a reason I'm mentioning it. Because once I read this, then my first response was, what? AYFKM? As if you watch my tweets at BZEP, at BZEP. AYFKM means, are you fucking kidding me? Well, remember the CDC said, well, we put that guidance out in error, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Now they had a story that came out. On October the 5th, it says, CCP virus can spread through airborne transmission, CDC says. The virus that causes COVID-19 can be spread sometimes through airborne particles in enclosed spaces with inadequate ventilation. Oh, you mean like a airplane? The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention said in an updated guidance on October 5th. The Chinese Communist Party virus causes the disease COVID-19, although not as common as transmission through close contact. Airborne transmission of the virus can sometimes happen under conditions allowing for small droplets and particles to linger in the air for minutes or even hours, the CDC said in updated guidance. These viruses may be able to infect people who are further than 6 feet away from the person who is infected or after that person has left the space, the agency said, of airborne particles. Now, are you thinking what I'm thinking? Americans have been told for months to social distance 6 feet, a distance of 6 feet from non-household members to avoid transmitting this terrible virus. Now they say it's aerosolized. Now they're saying that it can linger in the air for an hour, a couple of hours, 6 hours. And 6 feet is no longer applicable. But I got a question for you. Since that came out October 5th, did anything change? Because if it's so terrible, why aren't we distancing 10 feet? Why aren't we distancing 12 feet? Why aren't we distancing 20 feet and every enclosed space needs to be has to have all of its air replaced every hour. There needs to be an air exchange. But you didn't hear about that. What? How does that happen? That no one now listens to the CDC. That's their update. Is it, I had to ask, is it because this information is absolutely too damned grim to process? Or is it unenforceable? 6 feet? 6 feet? You can go to hell. Wouldn't this mean, though, that essentially everyone would have to be inside if we continue on the current path of lockdown mania? Has this thing thrown a massive camshaft in the gears of government? And the other thing is, why hasn't anybody heard of this? Questions? Do I got questions? I got questions. Funny thing is, Gavin Newsom has answers. Put your mask down between every bite as you patronize any open restaurant. I'm not kidding. California Governor Gavin Newsom is ridiculed after urging diners to wear their masks in between bites. This came out. This was official. I'm not kidding. But also warned them to minimize the number of times you take it off. He tweeted about this on October 3rd. 3 images showed this, and I've seen these. Showed a diner in a mask at a table in front of a second picture of a person eating without a mask. In the third image, the diner was back in their mask, but the post also said, minimize the number of times you take your mask off. So it should be no shock whatsoever that the message sparked ridicule from any number of California residents. One guy said, this has got to be the most ridiculous statement I think I've ever heard. Another person said, if this is confirmed, I live in the dumbest state of the union. Meanwhile, this stat came out that no one wants to hear. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, back in schools, statistics indicate that out of 70,000 plus positive reported COVID-19 cases in universities all across the union, there were 3 hospitalizations and 0 deaths to date. You also know, BZ, I thought I'd throw this out too, because I found this amusing, and it got retweeted a whole bunch of times. I put out a little meme about a vaccine, and I wrote, because I think it's true, after all this crap we've listened to, the vaccine should be tested on politicians. If they survive, the vaccine is safe. If they don't survive, the country is safe. And so now on October 12th, the absolutely unthinkable occurred. Hold the presses. The WHO, the World Health Organization, said lockdowns are damaging. This is October the 12th. WHO, the World Health Organization, warns against COVID-19 lockdowns due to economic damage. Oh, wait, there are other considerations. Well, the World Health Organization is saying that. The WHO has warned leaders against relying on COVID-19 lockdowns to tackle outbreaks, after previously saying countries should be careful how quickly they reopen. WHO, are you seeing a pattern? Are you seeing a pattern in this, folks? Yeah, we know. No, we don't. Yeah, we know. No, we don't. We know this. No, we don't. We know that. No, we don't. WHO envoy Dr. David Nabarro said such restrictive measures should only be treated as a last resort, the British magazine The Spectator reported in a video interview. So, oddly enough, here's me having that particular interview. And if I'm not mistaken, it went something like this.
Professor Sunetra Gupta from Oxford University on, and she was implying, and I'm interested in you because you have a global mandate, a global view, was that a problem we don't think about in lockdowns is that they're very nationalistic. That if we lock down our economy...
By the way, if I haven't said, this is Dr. David Nabarro, Nabarro.
And it hits our economy. But it also means we are not buying stuff. We're not trading with weaker economies. We are not just destroying our own jobs. We're destroying the jobs of all those that in the poorer parts of the world that export to us. That would seem to me to be a reasonable point.
Really important point by Professor Gupta. I want to say it again. We in the World Health Organization do not advocate lockdowns as a primary means of control of this virus. The only...
What? Are you kidding me? What?
Lockdowns as a primary means of control of this virus. The only time we believe a lockdown is justified is to buy you time to reorganize, regroup, rebalance your resources, protect your health workers who are exhausted. But by and large, we'd rather not do it. Just look at what's happened to the tourism industry, for example.
Okay, remember what he's saying, because I'm going to go in other places. You well know that's what I do.
The Caribbean or in the Pacific, because people aren't taking their holidays. Look what's happened to smallholder farmers all over the world because their markets have got dented. Look what's happening to poverty levels. It seems that we may well have a doubling of world poverty by next year. We may well have at least a doubling of child malnutrition because children are not getting meals at school and their parents in poor families are not able to afford it. This is a terrible, ghastly global catastrophe, actually. And so we really do appeal to all world leaders. Stop using lockdown as your primary control method.
What?
Catastrophe, actually. And so we really do appeal to all world leaders. Stop using lockdown as your primary control.
What?
We really do appeal to all world leaders. Stop using lockdown as your primary control method. Develop better systems for doing it. Work together and learn from each other. But remember, lockdowns just have one consequence that you must never, ever belittle, and that is making poor people an awful lot poorer.
Well, we didn't hear about that until now. When was that? What did BZ say about that? Oh, yeah, that was this month. Today's the 22nd. Well, it's the 23rd if you're on the East Coast. It's 1749 and 22.723 subcluster Grote 5, page 20 in Bolivia. In Bolivian time. I never understood Bolivian time. October the 9th, and now this has changed. Wow. Did you hear that? Are the states responding to the new WHO guidelines? Well, of course they aren't. Proving that, again, in an election year, everything is about the election. And that Democrats are doing their level best to ruin a President Trump re-election. And if people have to suffer or die or pay in the United States, no problemo. They are jiggy with that. Europe is getting worse. Wait. Europe, wasn't that the shining example of what to do? Now what? I know, I got a great idea. I got it. Here's the solution. Let's double down on failure. Less than a week ago, European nations smash COVID-19 records as WHO warns daily deaths could surpass April peak. This was on the 16th, after the WHO told us about lockdowns on the 9th. Concern is mounting in Europe as countries smash records for daily coronavirus cases. And the World Health Organization warns the daily death toll on the continent could reach 5 times its April peak within months. Countries that managed to contain infection rates through spring lockdowns and began relaxing measures are watching the virus return with a vengeance, with Germany, France, and the Czech Republic all reporting record case numbers in the past 2 days. The fall-winter surge continues to unfold in Europe with exponential increases in daily cases. But wait, remember what I said? Listen very closely to what people are saying. They're talking about cases, cases, cases. Europe's tally of new cases in its 5 most affected countries, which together have a similar population to the U.S., was about 42% greater than the increase in the U.S. in the week to October 13th. So the 7-day rolling average of new cases in the U.S. stood at about 49,542 on October 13th, compared with the average daily rate of 70,158 in France, the UK, Russia, Spain, and the Netherlands. The population of the 5 European countries mentioned, that's about 343 million. The U.S. population is 331 million. Dave Milner sent me this. Remember I mentioned Europe going crazy? America's kind of going crazy. Australia is insane, especially in Victoria. This is news from Australia. This is the headline. This is from October the 21st. October 21st. Just yesterday, or the day before, if you're on the East Coast. Headline, lockdown kills. 4 newborn babies in Australia die after travel restrictions prevent them from receiving life-saving care. 4 newborn babies have died after they were denied life-saving treatment due to coronavirus-related lockdowns, travel restrictions implemented by politicians in Australia. 4 newborns in Adelaide have died after being denied life-saving heart surgery because it wasn't available in Adelaide and they couldn't be transferred interstate because of travel restrictions, reported 9 News Australia. Their deaths have sparked outrage from medical professionals in the area demanding change. Medical professionals in South Australia are calling for urgent action this morning following shocking revelations of the deaths of 4 babies, said a 9 News Australia anchor on air Tuesday. The newborns were denied life-saving heart surgery because it wasn't available in Adelaide, and they couldn't be transferred interstate because of travel restrictions. This is madness, people. Killing infants because we allegedly don't want to kill people? The lockdown measures in Australia have been particularly severe. For example, the Wall Street Journal noted Sunday that politicians in Victoria, which includes Melbourne, finally said they, quote, would ease some of its harshest restrictions, such as forbidding people from leaving their homes for all but a handful of reasons, and keeping offices and retail outlets mostly shut, after daily infections fell to just 2 from a peak of more than 700. The Guardian on Monday laid out travel restrictions pertaining to South Australia as follows. South Australia, yeah, that's where Jack lives. Jack says in chat, I'm living these restrictions right now. South Australia. People from all states and territories except Victoria can enter South Australia without having to quarantine for 14 days, so long as they haven't been in Victoria in the past, oh, you'll love this word, fortnight. I used to measure speed that way. I had a different dial in my car that I clocked speed in furlongs per fortnight. South Australian residents will not be allowed to return to their state from Victoria unless they are essential travelers. Victorians living within 40 kilometers of the South Australian border are allowed into the state for essential purposes only. They cannot travel more than 40 kilometers into South Australia and must have a negative COVID-19 test in the last 7 days. And, of course, there's paperwork. You have to complete a registration form. According to the report, gatherings in private homes in South Australia are limited to 50 people. I haven't had 50 people in my house in quite some time, including members of the household. As long as the maximum density does not exceed... Pull out your yardstick for this, folks. Pull out your ruler. The maximum density does not exceed 1 person per 2 square meters. They ain't kidding. In New South Wales, the restrictions are even more strict, per The Guardian. On Sunday, 19 July, the the government issued advice asking people not to host or go to a gathering of more than 10 people at home. But the law in New South Wales currently allows 20 people from different households to visit. There is no limit to the number of guests you can have over per day, as long as there are no more than 20 at a time and guests can stay overnight. If there are more than 20 visitors at a time, every person can be held individually responsible for a breach of the public health order. You folks remember what was said? You can't stop a pandemic. And yet it's Trump's fault, says Joe Biden and all the leftist Democrats in the American media maggots. It's Trump's fault in the U.S. when every other country is in worse shape than we are. Plus, these are primarily nations having the strictest lockdown conditions from the start. Again, I ask, do you see a trend here? So I've identified CDC restrictions lifted, WHO restrictions lifted, recommending no lockdowns. But you have to ask, is California lifting restrictions? No, why should it? This just came out October the 13th. Governor Newsom signs and limits gatherings to 3 families, 2 hours or less. No singing. AYFKM. No singing. Governor Gavin Newsom and his California Department of Public Health issued another new set of social distancing guidelines prohibiting gatherings that include more than 3 households at any time. The October 9th document, Mandatory Requirements for All Gatherings, explains that all private gatherings must limit the number of attendees and are required to be held outside. Now, there are definitions. Gatherings are defined as social situations that bring together people from different households at the same time in a single space or a place. When people from different households mix, this increases the risk of transmission of COVID-19. Gatherings, it gets more detailed. Come on, man. This is California. Always spell it with a K. Gatherings should be 2 hours or less. The longer the duration, the risk of transmission increases. Rules for, this is its own little subheading. Rules for singing, chanting, and shouting at outdoor gatherings. Singing, chanting, shouting, and physical exertion significantly increases the chance of COVID-19 transmission because these activities increase the release of respiratory droplets. Remember what the CDC just said. And fine aerosols into the air. Because of this, singing, chanting, you chanters, damn you, and shouting, you shouters, damn you, are strongly discouraged. But if they occur, the following rules and recommendations apply. But wait, there's more recommendations and rules. Do you think I'm making this up? I love doing this because you get to see how incredibly stupid is California. I'm reading from their recommendations. I'm not making this up. All people who are singing or chanting should wear a face covering at all times while singing or chanting, including anybody who is leading a song or a chant. We can't leave the leaders out. Come on. Because these activities pose a very high risk of COVID-19 transmission. Face coverings are essential to reduce the spread of respiratory droplets and fine aerosols. People who are singing, shouting, chanting, or exercising are strongly encouraged to maintain physical distancing beyond 6 feet. Ooh, there it is. To further reduce risk, people who are singing or chanting are strongly encouraged to do so. Okay, I got to start over. People who are singing or chanting are strongly encouraged to do so quietly at or below the volume of a normal speaking voice. So remember, this is the same state that tells you to put your mask down. They're telling you how to chew, and now they're telling you at what decibel to speak. You can't forget. Come on, you can't forget music. Instrumental music is allowed as long as the musicians maintain at least 6 feet physical distancing. Musicians must be from one of the 3 households. How can you forget the 3 household limit? Playing, I'm not making this up, I swear to God. Playing of wind instruments, designated as any instrument played by the mouth, such as a trumpet or clarinet, is strongly discouraged. You can't write this shit. And this revelation from the Federalist, completely uncovered by the American media maggots. You may have heard of this in passing, but I'm emphasizing this to you because the fear porn lives large in people all around you. This is from October 12th. CDC study finds overwhelming majority of people getting coronavirus wore masks. A Center of Disease Control report released in September shows that masks and face coverings are not effective in preventing the spread of COVID-19, even for those people who consistently wear them. Hey, got a question for you. Let me know in chat. Have you been shouted at by a Karen? I haven't, not yet, but they're all over the place. A study conducted in the U.S. in July found that when they compared 154 case patients who tested positive for COVID-19 to a control group of 160 participants from healthcare facilities who were symptomatic but tested negative, over 70% of the case patients were contaminated with the virus and fell ill despite always wearing a mask. They reported they always wear a mask. In the 14 days before illness onset, 71% of the case patients and 74% of control participants reported always using cloth face coverings or other mask types when in public. The report so stated. By the way, I'm just reminding you, in case you haven't grokked the concept, remember, it is forbidden for you to have this knowledge. Also from nationalreview.com, this is from October 4th. Stats hold a surprise. Lockdowns may have little effect on COVID-19 spread. Data suggest mandatory lockdowns exacted a great cost with a questionable effect of transmissions. Again, I repeat, are you seeing a trend here? Identifying one. I am. Hold up your hand if you are. Thanks. If lockdowns really altered the course of this pandemic, then coronavirus case counts should have clearly dropped whenever and wherever lockdowns took place. The effect should have been obvious, though with a time lag. It takes time for new coronavirus infections to be officially counted, so we would expect the numbers to plummet as soon as the waiting time is over. The authors of that study conclude, the evidence suggests then that the sweeping mandated lockdowns that followed voluntary responses exacted a massive cost with little effect on transmission. We can't change the past, they wrote, but we should avoid making the same mistake again. Damn them. I'm about to give you more forbidden knowledge. Has anyone heard of the Great Barrington Declaration? Of course you haven't, because the American media maggots want to keep you fat and stupid so that you'll do everything they tell you immediately. Great Barrington Declaration, BZ. What the hell is that? This is a quote from their site. As infectious disease epidemiologists and public health scientists, we have grave concerns about the damaging physical and mental health impacts of the prevailing COVID-19 policies, and we recommend an approach we call focused protection. Hence, they came up with what was called the Great Barrington Declaration. And it goes like this. As infectious disease epidemiologists and public health scientists, we have grave concerns about the damaging physical and mental health impacts of the prevailing COVID-19 policies, and we recommend that approach, coming from both the left and right, and I'm reading from their site. Coming from both the left and right, and around the world, we have devoted our careers to protecting people. Current lockdown policies are producing devastating effects on short and long-term public health. The results, to name a few, include lower childhood vaccination rates, worsening cardiovascular disease outcomes, fewer cancer screenings, and deteriorating mental health. Stop. I ask you again. Do you know people immediately or friends who say that they have acquaintances, family members, or friends who have committed suicide? I do. Leading to greater excess mortality in years to come, with the working class and younger members of society carrying the heaviest burden. Keeping students out of school is a grave injustice. I'll get back to this in just a second. I just want to let you guys know what you're listening to.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Fortunately, our understanding of the virus is growing, but keeping these measures in place until a vaccine is available will cause irreparable damage, with the underprivileged disproportionately harmed. We know that vulnerability to death from COVID-19 is more than 1,000-fold higher in the old and infirm than in the young. Indeed, for children, COVID-19 is less dangerous than many other viruses, than many other harms, including influenza. Now, as immunity builds in the population, the risk of infection to all, including the vulnerable, falls. We know that the population will eventually reach herd immunity, i.e. the point at which the rate of new infections is stable, and that this can be assisted by, but not dependent upon, a vaccine. Let me read that over because a lot of people don't understand this. That can be assisted by, but not dependent upon a vaccine. How many people are saying, well, we need to depend upon a vaccine only? They continue to state, our goal should therefore be to minimize mortality and social harm until we reach herd immunity. The most compassionate approach that balances the risks and benefits of reaching herd immunity is to allow those who are at minimal risk of death to live their lives normally, to build up immunity to the virus through natural infection, while better protecting those who are at higher risk. We call this focused protection. Adopting measures to protect the vulnerable should be the central aim of public health responses to COVID-19. By way of example, nursing homes should use staff with acquired immunity and perform frequent PCR testing of other staff and other visitors. Staff rotation should be minimized. Retired people living at home should have groceries and other essentials delivered to their homes. When possible, they should meet family members outside rather than inside. A comprehensive and detailed list of measures, including approaches to multi-generational households, can be implemented and is well within the scope and capability of public health professionals. But note this. Those who are not vulnerable should immediately be allowed to resume life as normal. Simple hygiene measures, such as hand washing, staying home when sick, should be practiced by everyone to reduce the herd immunity threshold. Schools and universities should be open for in-person teaching. Extracurricular activities such as sports should be resumed. Young, low-risk adults should work normally rather than from home. Restaurants and other businesses should be open. Arts, music, sports, and other cultural activities should resume. People who are more at risk may participate if they wish, while society as a whole enjoys the protection conferred about the vulnerable by those who have built up herd immunity. And I want to tell you, this too is forbidden knowledge, as it leaves the door open of supporting President Trump's reelection because it may make him look good. California Senator Melissa Mendez had an observation. She said, the governor, Gavin Newsom, just moved Riverside County back into the most restrictive lockdown tier, with unemployment in California, always spell it with a K, 50% higher than the national average. He has just put more people out of work. We cannot sustain this. Now, most recently in California, 2 newer events. First is from Gavin Newsom. California announces restrictive reopening guidelines for Disneyland, Universal Studios, less restrictive measures for smaller parks. This just came out the 20th, 2 days ago, or 3 days ago if you're on the East Coast. On Monday, California Governor Gavin Newsom teased the release of reopening rules for theme parks in the state, saying, cryptically, "We're going to break up the theme parks. Not just 1 or 2 brands, it is many different parts of the theme park industry." Well, now we know what it means. California's Director of Health and Human Services, Dr. Mark Galley, said Tuesday smaller theme parks can resume operations in the state's orange tier. Capacity will be limited to 25% or 500 viewers. Remember that, 25%, or 500 visitors, whichever is fewer. Only outdoor attractions may reopen, and only to guests who are residents of the same county. So, Gavin doing his very best to make sure that guidelines are as convoluted and changeably fluctuous as possible. Kind of like trying to nail Jell-O to a tree. The announcement drew a swift negative reaction from executives at Disneyland, Universal Studios Hollywood, Legoland, and others. Masks have to be worn in the parks at all times, except when visitors are eating or drinking. Now remember, put that mask down after every bite. After every bite. Reservations will be required for all parks with temperature checks at the gate. Orange County, where Disneyland and Knott's Berry Farm are, is currently in the red tier. Los Angeles, home to Universal Studios, is in the most restrictive tier, purple. Does anybody completely understand, by the way, the concept of a virus completely and voluntarily halting its spread when your mouths are open? So remember, you can sit at your table and pull your mask up and eat, and if they see the mask going up, they know to stop. Very important. Very important. So here's what you got to do, according to Obergruppenführer Newsom. Among the physical distancing recommendations are, now you remember the details in the other thing I told you about? You want details? You got details. One-way foot traffic and clear directions to better control the flow of guests throughout the park, especially in certain heavily used and narrow thoroughfares. Plexiglass dividers on switchback lines, queues for attractions and concessions, or close sections of switchback lines, queues to ensure sufficient physical distance from visitors. You getting all this? I hope you're writing it down. Implement timed and or advanced reservations, ticketing systems, and pre-assigned seating or activity areas. Well, that's easy to do in Disneyland, isn't it? Thousands and thousands and thousands of people. Hold that thought. Discontinue tours or guided experiences that combine household or individuals from different households into the same tour group. Disneyland's haunted house. You ever been there? It's pretty cool. That comes to mind. Just saying. Face coverings are mandatory on attractions and rides throughout the park. No indoor lines are allowed for any attraction or ride. So after I read that, what do you think was my first thought? My first thought was, what's the point? And again, as I continue to illustrate, it's cases, cases, cases. Sooner or later, everybody is going to be a case, okay? Cases mean nothing. So now maybe you can see why Disney CEO Bob Iger is most definitely off the Newsom train. He had to release 28,000 employees. And running Disneyland is completely unsustainable at 25% capacity. And remember what Obergruppenführer Newsom says. I don't agree with the new CDC guidance, period, full stop. It is not the policy in the state of California. We're influenced by those who are experts in the field who feel very differently, i.e. those I can control. Then there's a doctor named Wooten, W-O-O-T-E-N, down in San Diego. who says it's her job. It's her job not to listen to WHO advice on lockdowns. I guarantee you she did before, but now, not now.
KSI asked whether county officials agreed or disagreed with the World Health Organization's stance against lockdowns as a way to contain the spread due to the damage done to the economies.
No.
Now, here's what Dr. Wilma Wooten had to say.
It is not my job to share what I agree or disagree with, but to follow the guidance that we get primarily from the state.
Yeah.
And we've gone the lockdown area, and we saw the economic
Facts can go to hell. We listened to the Alba Group and Fiera.
instability that caused. When our numbers, our case rates decreased, then we opened and we learned our lesson about opening too fast. So we essentially locked down again, and now we are going at a more intentional. Slow rate. And even with this, and we've been talking about this in most of the Q&A, we still have an elevated case rate. So if individuals will all do their part, if businesses from restaurants to schools to other employers, governments, everyone doing their part to implement these preventive measures, not allowing people to come to work when they have symptoms, and people taking the personal responsibility not to go to work when they are symptomatic. I think we can turn the table here and help to decrease the spread of COVID-19 and decrease the local transmission and number of cases.
Okay, what that means is, I'll translate for you because I speak leftist, as you well know. I listen to Gavin and no one else. And the facts, because I'm paid to listen to Gavin, and apparently I want to get on some board he has in the future, I'm going to prostrate myself in front of the great Gavin, dictatorial himself. The translation also is the actual science can go to hell. It was sure odd, don't you think, how most leftists were all adrape over the WHO and the CDC when they advocated mass lockdowns. However, strange, that doesn't it? That seems a little strange, don't you think? Can you be more nakedly political than this? Maybe you can, but I'm not quite sure how. And then, you're not supposed to hear this. This is, again, forbidden knowledge. Turn it down. This time, this came from NPR. What? October 20th. Studies point to big drop in COVID-19 death rates. NPR. 2 new peer-reviewed studies are showing a sharp drop in mortality among hospitalized COVID-19 patients. The drop is seen in all groups, including older patients and those with underlying conditions, suggesting that physicians are getting better at helping patients survive their illness. We find the death rate has gone down statistically and substantially, says Leora Horwitz, a doctor who studies population health at New York University's Grossman School of Medicine, and an author on one of the studies which looked at thousands of patients from March to August. The study, which was of a single health system, finds that mortality has dropped among hospitalized patients by 18 percentage points since the pandemic began. Patients in the study had a 25.6% chance of dying at the start of the pandemic. Now they have a 7.6% chance. Let me remind you, forbidden knowledge, which I'm telling you, came from the CDC, and this hasn't changed. COVID survival rate. Grok this concept, folks. Play this show to a doubter. Because I'm doing what anybody can do. I'm going to the internet and I'm reading stories. I'm no rocket scientist. I can barely spell WHO or CDC. 0 to 19 years. your survival rate is 99.997%. If you're 20 to 49 years of age, your survival is 99.98%. If you're 50 to 69 years old, it's 99.5%. If you're 70 plus with comorbidities, you have a 94.6% chance of survival. Like I said, folks, do you see a trend here? Something, I don't know, similar to the science says, open up. But leftists are doing the opposite. So, I ask, what have we learned? Well, I think we've learned a few things. When Democrats, leftists, and the American media maggots bleat and scream and cry that it's all about the science in terms of Wuhan 19, you should instantly substitute in your brain housing group. In an election year, everything is about the election. And moreover, making sure that OMB, President Donald John Trump, the guy with the dead orange cat on his head, isn't reelected. Because I'm telling you right now, it is that simple.
Monsieur has unlocked!
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, thanks for listening to the Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show, live and direct right here on the SHR Media Network. If you want to contact me, you can find me on Twitter at BZEP, at BZEP. You can also go to my blog at bloviatingzeppelin.net. Promotional consideration is by the Lockheed Martin Skunk Works and also by the Boeing Company. If it ain't Boeing, I ain't going. And also by Pratt & Whitney Engines. Thrust. You can trust. Tiaras are by My Little Pony.
To the folks that I know.
Thanks to my personal KC-135 Kettle One refueling team, who I will be concerting in less than an hour. Bank on it. And thanks to everybody here for listening live. Thanks to everybody. There's a ton of people in chat in SHR, a ton of people in Facebook chat. Thank you ever so kindly for being here tonight. Thanks for listening in podcast. I appreciate each and every one of you that take time out of your busy day. Everybody, have a great weekend. Come back Tuesday night. Brandon Straka in the house Tuesday night.
Everybody quiet down now and get some sleep.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, Mama. Good night, Ben.
Good night, everyone. Good night, Mama. Good night, Daddy.
Good night, children. Good night, Daddy. Good night, Elizabeth.
Good night, John Boy. Good night, Jim Bob. Good night, Jim Bob.
Good night, Jim Bob.
What's going on? I was asleep. What's everybody doing?
Good night,
Jim Bob.
Good night, and good luck.